My name is Michael, and this is my aha moment. It was 7 years ago. My 18-month-old son and my wife, who was pregnant with our second child, was playing at the mall. And my wife didn't know at the time, and she was unaware that there was a rail that was a little over 5 inches apart, just right where they were playing, where my son was playing, and his head was only 5 inches wide, so he slipped through the rail pretty easily. He fell 16 feet and landed on the back side of his head. I found out about it. I lived about 45 minutes away, and I drove. Was real upset. Got to the hospital and walked into the pediatric resuscitation room. And my son Preston was laying on the table, and he was asleep. And the doctors weren't really aware. They didn't know at the time exactly the extent of his injuries, but he woke up and he started crying, and he really wanted to get to me. He saw me there, and he was, with all of his might, he was waving his right arm and his right leg. He could only move one side of his body. He was paralyzed on the left side. All he wanted was me to hold him, and it was at that moment I realized what was important in life, and that was my family, my son. It wasn't. It didn't have anything to do with how much I worked or how successful I was at that point. It was the only thing that was the most important thing was that I was his daddy, and especially 5 days later when we walked out of the hospital and none of the doctors could explain it, I was able to hold his hand and walk out, and it was just a true miracle. And so I went from the span of 5 days from the worst day of my life to the most triumphant day. And I look back at that moment now, and I just realized that that's what's most important, and that was my aha moment, was realize that, it's not all about success, but it's about who you are and your family, and especially your children, your legacy you leave behind.